Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In many ways, and I've said this for years, I am actually a member of the tax court. I'm an American attorney, obviously, as I've stated in many of my introductions. I am a member of the tax court in the United States. I do, from time to time, advise folks on tax matters, primarily pertaining to entities here in Thailand, taxation in an international context. But the reason for this video, it's going a little deeper. It's going into sort of my opinion and where I think sort of things are heading, if that makes any sense. I think we're heading to a place where tax status and immigration status are probably going to be more intertwined as time goes on. I want to be very clear, if I'm not clear from some of my other opinion videos, especially on things like central bank digital currencies, I am not overly in favor of this. I very much enjoy and believe that the separation of jurisdictions, the sort of arm's length of national jurisdictions especially, is a good thing in many ways. I believe international travel and the right, the human right, as well as the US constitutional right, but the human right generally, as noted by the UN themselves, to travel, are very fundamental rights to humanity, period. Now, they sort of say right to travel, but we never said you had the right to travel without being taxed or something along those lines. You know, we said you had the right to travel, but not the right to travel without a passport. You got to go through X, Y, Z steps to get to that. And I'm not going to go into a full-blown analysis of like the passport issue. We've all kind of come to, 100 years ago, they didn't use passports. If you watch a movie called Tea with Mussolini, it's a pretty good example of one where up to that point, British, especially British debutantes would go on their grand tour through Italy, for example. People didn't have passports back then. They just went to that country, and they usually used what were called letters of introduction for banking purposes and things of this nature. Again, it was sort of formal, very formal on an informal level, if you will. People didn't need government to travel and things like that. And I think the world would be perfectly fine if it would probably be a good thing if we were trying to lean back to that way of doing things. But unfortunately, that is not the way that the world works. And unfortunately, we are in a situation where we are seeing increasing restrictions, scrutiny, just all sorts of oversight, if you will. And it's almost not even government oversight. It's this kind of weird quasi-governmental sort of supranational oversight that's occurring in the corridors of travel via airports or even by sea or even on rail where you have to deal with international corporations that provide travel services, and then they have all these rules that sort of exist supranationally. Saw a lot of this during COVID. It was really, to my mind, it was not fun to watch, and it was definitely not fun to deal with, but we got through all of that. And one thing coming off of the recent announcement with regard to changes regarding how Thailand views, tax liability on offshore income, especially for folks that are living in Thailand. We're seeing some real sea changes with regard to tax, and I'm seeing more and more how tax is becoming very much intertwined with immigration. It's almost becoming, I could see a future where the two are inextricably linked, especially where we have all these travel documents, so-called vaccine passports, which I've spoken out against time and time again. I do not think that this is a good idea for exactly this reason. If they can track everybody for purposes of a pandemic or for purposes of, whatever event that they say that they need to track everybody for, it's not far off that governments who make all their money off of taxing people might start looking at that and saying, oh, there may be avenues to tax people even more effectively by use of these methodologies. So the point I'm trying to make with regard to this video is the future looks a little bit Orwellian with regard to how there's going to be this intersection, I think more and more, between immigration and tax. And I've always said myself, just personally to people, they've kind of always, people have asked me over the years, especially other attorneys, oddly, that they're like, you're in a really weird sort of niche on your own where you do like a lot of US immigration work, some tax work. These are both very narrow fields, but they're very deep. Now, tax is not so narrow. Everybody at the end of the day has to deal with some kind of tax authority, at the end of the day. But that said, in a sense, it's narrow because, for example, the United States tax laws, it's sort of its own body of law. It sort of sits off on in its own little sector off to itself. Immigration is very similar. So from my standpoint, my analysis, in a way, I'm kind of uniquely able to analyze both things in the broader context. I've heard it said from time to time that there are people out there that can be at 30,000 feet, come all the way back down to ground level and be able to go back up in their analysis of certain things. That's kind of where I'm at now with this tax and immigration thing. Point I'm trying to make is, as time moves on, I think these two things are going to intersect more and more to the point where a lot of this documentation is going to overlap. Now, exactly what that looks like in the future remains to be seen, but we will certainly keep you updated on this channel as the situation evolves.